Hello again, YouTube. This is the Brain coming at you with another Kingdom Hearts trading card game video. For this one, I'm going to do a deck review of a deck called Axel, which for those of you who have played the card game is one of the nobody characters from Kingdom Hearts 2. Before we get started, this is sort of my thing, is showing off some cards that I'm proud of. This is a Japanese level 3 version of Sephiroth. This came from the very last set that was printed before the game went bust. It's not really all that powerful of a card, but he's really cool looking. Sephiroth always has great artwork, so just one of those things I'm happy to have in the collection, so cool stuff. So moving right along, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Axel here. So Axel has 7 attack and 2 magic, and has a bunch of text, so I'm going to go ahead and read this here. I know it's going to be a little out of focus, sorry, but you cannot play attack cards, friend cards, or magic friend cards. You may play your nobody cards and your player 13 cards into your friend area as friend cards. The support value of nobody cards played in your friend area is half of their POW value rounded down. Treat nobody cards as both nobody cards and friend cards. Axel can play all levels of fire magic cards regardless of their magical value. If you use Axel in a challenge against Roxas, you lose 5 attack. Okay, so opening line, you can't really play a lot of the cards you can with all of your other player cards like your Soras and your Rikus, so that kind of sucks. He does have 7 HP, which isn't too bad. 7 attack is good, and he can play fire magic of any level, which is cool, and sticks true to the theme from the game. However, it does severely limit your options for support and makes you very dependent upon magic. So, you know, it's a fun deck to play, but it's not going to be competitive against people that are going to play lots of things like Phil or Owl, because those are really going to shut you down hard. But anyway, instead of showing you an entire deck list, like from start to finish, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you kind of what I think the core of a deck like this would be, and then you can go ahead and add your own things, and I'll make some suggestions here or there. So I'm going to move Axel up out of the way here. So first things first, you know, you got 7 attack. My opinion on this is not going to be a good deck for aggro. You're going to want to world race with this. So first and foremost, if you remember from the video game, Axel had his like chakrams, which in the card game they just call them rings, right? I happen to be lucky enough that I own 6 copies of this card, so I had to dig through my entire collection to find all 6 copies and put them in this deck. What this does is it gives you +3 attack as an equipment card. You can equip, you can have more than 3 of these in your deck at any one time. Axel can equip this card as well as another, so in other words 2 of this same card. While the card is equipped, fire magic cards deal +4 damage. If you remember, Axel likes to play fire. Looks like it's pretty good. Discard this card from play, and if you do, deal 3 damage to one target dark card in play. So when you have lots of copies like this, it allows you to equip 2, ditch 1 to do some damage, then equip another one and still get the +3 attack. A lot of different options, lots of ways you can mix and match. But again, if you run up against somebody who manages to block you from casting magic, you're kind of toast. Like this card, a lot of fun, but these are hard to find copies of, and so the fact that I have 6 is kind of blows my mind, so I feel very fortunate. So let's talk about the bread and butter here, right? You're going to want to be doing lots and lots of fire magic. So for some silly reason, when I set this up in my own copy of the deck, I don't have 3 copies of the level 3, which, you know, I can dig it up later. But so for the Faraga here, this does 6 damage to one target dark card. Now, a thing to be careful about when it comes to these cards, if you look at the artwork on this one, that's from one of the earlier English sets. This is from Break of Dawn. This one has a very different, you know, piece of art, and the numbering and stuff looks different. This one says this card deals 7 damage. So it's the same card, level 4, but the Break of Dawn one does 1 extra damage. Why? I have absolutely no idea. My advice, find as many of these level 4s from Break of Dawn as you can if you want to run this deck. The one caveat, they're rares, so good luck with that. If you look at the level 3 here, I'll leave one on the table so you can see it. The text here says this card deals 4 damage to one target dark or nobody card. When you play this card, you may add +1 damage for each fire effect magic card in your discard pile. So that's why it's important to have 3 of these guys, right? Because the more of these other cards that you have in your discard that you've used, the POW goes up. And so obviously that's a good thing. We move to the bottom end of the ladder, which is the stage 2, level 2 rather. All of these are from Break of Dawn. This card also deals 4 damage to target dark or nobody card. So, deals the same amount of damage, but it doesn't get the kicker. So again, these are going to be the primary ways that you're going to deal damage. with Axel in addition to the rings. So it's actually pretty good. It can pump out a lot of damage. You could theoretically challenge someone and win, but it's not a strategy that I would rely on. Doing something more like World Racing makes a heck of a lot more sense with this setup. All right, so we'll put all the magic out of the way here. And then when it comes to friend cards, honestly, the only real options you have are going to be, that were printed in English, is something like Dusk here, which is, it's a level 1, it has 6 POW, which means it only has 3 POW when it's in your friend area. You may have more than 3 copies of this card in your deck. This card and all other nobody cards in play gain +1 POW. So, again, if you overload on these the way I did with the Chakrams, if you put, I've seen trick deck lists in the past where people say, run 30 Dusk. Yeah, that's great, but you only get 6 cards in your hand per turn, and do you really want to be drawing Dusks every single turn? I don't know. Watch out for Monstro if you use that approach. The other thing you can do is you can play Assassins, which are nice, and they work really well with Roxas. Or not with Roxas, with Axel rather. If your player card is Axel, this card gains +5 POW, which means it actually keeps the 9 POW listed on here if you were to play it on your opponent's world, which means, dropping a 9 support value friend in your friend area is certainly not a bad thing, but when you only get to run 3 of them, not so great. But again, you couple those with Dusks and that does a lot of damage. So, there's saving graces to this deck, but you've got to try and build it. My suggestion would be to build it lean and mean so that you can recycle as quickly as possible. Because again, you can't play cards like Oblivion or Ultima Weapon. You can only get away with things like the rings and things like magic, and then these guys. You can also play the Organization 13 characters, which I don't have any copies sitting out here right now. But the thing to keep in mind is they're also counted as nobody cards, which means that their POW gets rounded down, gets cut in half, rounded down. So they end up being, mostly level 2 characters. They give you 2 or 3 support. I don't know that that's really something you want, except again that the Dusk pattern does actually benefit them, so it can work. But like I said, if you're trying to run lean and mean, that's what you kind of got to watch out for. Now, when it comes to dark cards for this deck, my suggestion there is you're going to want some draw power. So something like a Bouncy Wild, it's a level 1. You can play it even if you're playing an aggro deck that only plays 1 or 2 worlds. You can still play those and draw a card. It's really the only draw support you get in this deck, which is kind of lame. I guess you could try and run level 1 or level 2 Bambis, but that's a 1-for-1 swap and it really doesn't do much for you. At least the Bouncy Wild counts as something for your opponent to get stuck on. I always like running Pete because he prevents your opponent from being able to play the King, which the King is a powerful card. I'm a huge fan of Cave of Wonders Guardian. It basically means that if that's out there with another character, another dark card, all damage for that turn is done to your Cave of Wonders Guardian, which buys you a full turn. The only way they can get around that is if they play something like Peter Pan or another card that allows you to ignore card text. Cerberus, beautiful looking card, also requires your opponent to use at least 3 friends. You compare, or you run something like Cerberus alongside of Cave of Wonders Guardian, really good. Cerberus alongside something like Behemoth, which requires your opponent to use all of their available friends to defeat it, is also another good combination. Why did I stack these this way? Sorry about that. And then the last one, this really just sort of blends with the Axel theme. Trickmaster, it's not a great card. It doesn't work in any deck that doesn't rely heavily on fire magic. Basically what this says here is you can put any number of fire magic cards from your hand onto this card during your action phase. That does not count as a play. This card gets plus X POW, where X is the sum of all damage that those magic cards could do. Right? So again, if you really want to stack something up and block your opponent, you could do that. That would be great if you're playing a World Racer deck. If you're playing against an aggro deck, that's a card, Trickmaster, you could just chuck it. When it comes to other things you can put in here, I have a couple of different options. I toyed with the idea of putting something like a Parasite Cage, which allows you to steal a character from your opponent's side of the table and put it under here. You can run multiple copies of Bouncy Wild. That's a good idea. Lots and lots and lots of Dusks. And then when it comes to worlds, since you have a lot of Dusks, you could play theoretically something like Timeless River, where when it hits the table, you and your opponent both have to discard your friend with the lowest friend level. And it says if there are multiple cards of the same level in a player's friend area, he or she may select which one. So again, it's an interesting idea, especially if your opponent's relying on something that doesn't protect it. Like, again, Cloud and Sephiroth are protected from this, but if they have other cards on the table, it's a way to get rid of them. You know, and then there's other tricky things you can do too. Like, for example, you can put Wonderland level 2. What that does is fire effect damage is doubled here. You can imagine how crazy that gets. The thing to remember with that is if that's your world and your opponent challenges you during the challenge phase, magic, fire magic is doubled as well. So just keep that in mind. It's not just simply for defeating Heartless. So that's a wrap, I think, for this one, for this deck. There's a lot of other different options and little support things you can throw, curing spells, and you're obviously going to need to add a lot more worlds, but that'll really depend on your play style. So if you guys have any ideas on what to do with this deck, that would be awesome. Go ahead and leave comments. I'm always interested to see kind of how other people like to play things, because I really think it's a variety of different approaches that made this game, while it seems very simple, it also made it complex and fun to play. So yeah, hit me up with any questions or you know, suggestions for this deck, and if you guys have any requests for future videos, let me know. Thanks.